Tell people about me. I like to sing and women. Dean Martin did more than just sing and act. He was in a bad mood, keeps their cool all the time. With a drink in his hand and a joke on his tongue, he ruled Hollywood. But behind that easygoing charm was a life full of quiet sorrow, pain and loss. He made it to the top, but it cost him a lot. Dean had a tangled love life, and the deaths of his son and then his beloved wife made his story go from glamorous to heartbreaking. He was the man behind the tale. Come with us as we look into his life, his love, and the sadness that followed until he died in 1995. Dean Martin, the boy from Steubenville, wasn't always Dean Martin. He was given the name Dino Paul Crosetti on June 7, 1917 in Steubenville, Ohio. There were people in his family from Italy. His father was a barber named Gaetano Crutetti, and his mother Angela was born in Ohio to Italian parents. Dino grew up in a home where people only spoke Italian. He didn't really start learning English until he was 5 years old. He had a hard time in school because of this. Other kids picked on him because he didn't speak English well. His first few years of school were tough. He had a different feeling. After some time he said that school wasn't for him. He joked, "It's too bad those teachers thought I was too smart for me in school. I had a bike and I never skipped a meal." People laughed at that line, but it meant more than that. He didn't feel like he belonged. He was done with school by the 10th grade. He quit school and never went back to the classroom again. He went in a very different direction after making that choice, one with a lot of danger, hard work and rough jobs, trying to make a future. Dino tried to do what his father did after he graduated from school. Dino didn't want to become a barber like his dad wanted him to. He did a lot of little jobs to make ends meet. He worked as a gas station helper, milkman, and even a drugstore worker, but none of these jobs were interesting to him. Boxing was what interested him. Under the name Kid Crochet, Dino began to fight. It was hard to make money that way. He said he had 12 fights and won all but 11. That means he only won one. Even though he didn't win much, the experience changed him. His nose was broken, his lip was scarred and his fingers were broken, because he didn't even have enough money for the hand wraps that boxers wear. Dean did more than just fight in the ring though. When he went to New York City, he lived with Sonny King, an actress who was also having a hard time. Both of the young guys had dreams, but they needed money to live, so they thought of a strange plan. They used their little room as a kind of secret fight club. People paid to watch them box bare knuckle in their living room. There would be fights until someone was knocked out. Dean once beat Sonny in the first round of a real match. He knew this wasn't the life he wanted though. It wasn't possible to get beat up every day. He knew something had to change, but he didn't know what. From rooms full of smoke to singing on stage, Dino still had to find work after he quit fighting. He went to a secret casino hidden behind a smoke shop, which was just as sketchy. It was against the law, but it paid. He worked as a guy who moved the roulette wheel and dealt blackjack. This world was full of smoke and something strange happened here. Dino began to sing. People started to notice his voice after he started singing for his co-workers. It was soft, warm and charming. A band leader named Ernie McKay was one of the people who heard him. He told Dino that he could join the band. His life began to change after he said yes. He started singing in nightclubs in Ohio under the name Dino Martini, which came from the name of an opera singer, Nino Martini. In 1938, he joined forces with another famous band leader, Sammy Watkins. Watkins took him on a tour and told him one thing that would change his life. "You should become Dean Martin." That's what he did. Dean lived in New York and did shows full-time by 1943. It wasn't easy though. To stand out he had to put in a lot of work and keep changing how he looked. Not only was he building a singing career, he was also building a brand. That character would soon be known all over the world. Dean Martin's act changed as he became more well-known. He put on a show, not just sang. He always looked calm and easygoing when he walked out on stage with a whiskey glass in his hand. He acted like all he wanted to do was have fun. But he didn't come up with that act on his own. He took the style from someone named Phil Harris, artist whose image was built around being a showman who drank a lot and chased women. Dean made the look his own though. It made his fans love him. People called him the king of cool, but what was going on inside didn't always match what people saw. Dean didn't say anything. He didn't talk much, even at parties and other big events. In 1967, he gave Oriana Felici a rare interview in which he talked about why. He said everyone thought I was cocky and rude, but I wasn't. He didn't know what to say to people because he didn't know how to speak good English. Even though he was a star, his language problems from childhood still made him feel out of place, which is why he often kept quiet. He thought people would misunderstand him. People thought he was cool or distant, but he was just shy, and he never got over being shy. His life was full of contrasts. He was sure of himself and funny on stage. On stage he was quiet and not sure what to do. He never forgot where he came from though. He had a hard childhood and struggled with his own feelings his whole life. It was Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. Dean Martin's life changed a lot in August 1944. He's at the Belmont Plaza Hotel in New York. He met a young performer named Jerry Lewis. Dean was performing at the Glass Hat Club in the hotel when he saw Jerry and told him, "Hey, I saw your act. You're funny, kid." A friendship that would last for 10 years began with that one word. The two men quickly became friends. They joined their shows together to make a team. On July 24th, they played their first show together at the 500 Club in Atlantic City. At 1946, their first show didn't go well though. Nita Amato, the owner of the club, told them they'd be fired if the next show wasn't better because no one laughed. He simply went to the alley behind the club and thought of a new plan. While Dean tried to sing, Jerry would flail around like a bad busboy. He would drop things and make a mess, so Dean would throw bread rolls at him. It was crazy. People loved how silly and funny it was. Their jobs changed because of this new law. They pulled funny faces, told jokes and made up stories on the spot. It was funny that they didn't care about the crowd. They were just performing for each other. The act got bigger. All along the East Coast, they had shows. The Copacabana in New York was their first big show. They were a big hit. He first performed on TV in 1948, on the first episode of The Ed Sullivan Show, which was called the toast of the town at the time. He says they were on the show with famous artists like Rogers and Hammerstein. He says they hired young writers Norman Lear and Ed Simmons to make their act even better. From clubs to radio and movies, these writers helped them get there. In 1949, they got a part in the movie My Friend Irma through Paramount, where they were funny, but the deal gave them freedom. Abel Greshler, their agent, made sure that they could make one movie a year with their own company, York Productions. He said that they had full power over their radio and TV shows, records and club shows. They made a lot of money from this. Jerry Lewis wrote that Dean got married again in 1949 in his book Dean and Me, but cracks were appearing behind the laughter. As soon as the laughter stopped, things weren't perfect, even though they were successful. Some critics said that the two movies were too alike. Dean got tired of always having the same part in movies. What did he want? He stopped putting as much attention into their shows. A picture from 1954, when Three Ring Circus was being filmed, was used on the cover of Look magazine. It had Jerry Lewis and Cherie North in it. Dean, on the other hand, was missing from the scene. That was the last blow. Jack Keller, who was in charge of press for them, says that Dean stomped onto the set with the magazine. He swore at Keller and threw it in his face. Jerry Lewis recalled how Dean's mood changed. One day, Dean said, "Anytime you want to call it quits, just let me know." The fun was gone. Dean didn't feel like part of the show anymore. He said later, "Why the hell should I come in on time? There's not a damn thing for me to do." He felt like a background act, not an equal partner. In Three Ring Circus, Dean didn't even sing until 35 minutes into the film. And when he did, it was an old tune. He said to that big wide wonderful world, sung to animals. The partnership that once felt magical, now felt one-sided. Dean stayed professional, and worked until the contract ended, but the breakup came on July 25, 1956, exactly 10 years after they first teamed up. Dean walked away quietly, but with his head held high. Life with the Rat Pack. After parting ways with Jerry Lewis, Dean didn't slow down. He focused on his singing and acting career, and soon became a big name in Las Vegas. There, he joined a group of entertainers known as the Rat Pack. The crew included Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. They were known for their classy party-filled lifestyle, late nights, laughter and liquor. But while the group loved the wildlife, wasn't exactly like them. To outsiders, Dean looked like the wildest of them all. Sinatra once joked, he's got a tan, because he found a bar with a skylight, but that wasn't true. In real life, Dean wasn't much of a partier. While the rest of the pack stayed out until morning, Dean was often the first to leave. He liked doing things his way. Tom Dreesen, a comedian who opened for Sinatra, said that Dean's quiet style often annoyed Frank. But over time, Sinatra respected him more because of it. Dean wasn't trying to fit in. He did what felt right for him. Dean and Frank had a deep friendship. Dean's daughter Diana once said, to watch them on stage together was brilliant, because you could see the love in their eyes, the respect for each other. Their bond wasn't just for show. Their families were close too. They were more like brothers than just co-stars, but even close friendships can be tested. The mob, the drinks, and the act behind the man. Dean Martin may have become a smooth Hollywood icon, but his past was far from clean. Before fame, he had worked as a bootlegger, and even fought in bare-knuckle boxing matches. So when he started performing for mob-connected crowds alongside the Rat Pack, he wasn't shaken like others. He had already seen the darker side of life. While Frank Sinatra had deep ties with the mob, and most of the Rat Pack stayed polite and quiet around gangsters, Dean didn't play by their rules. After one performance, a group of mobsters came up to him and said, "We want to thank you for helping us out." Dean didn't smile. He simply looked them straight in the eye and replied, "No, I did it for Frank," and walked away. That bold moment showed Dean's past hadn't left him weak. It made him brave. The way people saw Dean also made him look like he drank a lot. On stage, he was almost always seen with a whiskey glass in his hand. Sammy Davis Jr., another member of the Rat Pack, once joked, "If this doesn't keep my hair straight, nothing will." But the glass really held Martinelli's apple juice. It was all part of the game. Dean's slurred speech and acting drunk were not real. Patty Gribbo, who sings backup for him, said it was just show business. In a talk show, Jerry Lewis even agreed with that. Dean himself told the Saturday Evening Post that he didn't drink nearly as much as I say I do. In that case, Dean Martin's charm came from more than just his voice. It was in how easy he seemed to do it. The show with Dean Martin. In the middle of the 1960s, NBC offered Dean his own comedy show. Dean agreed, but only on his own terms. He told them he could only work on Sundays, didn't want to practice, and would own the show once it aired. Yes, NBC said, "What else do you know?" Dean didn't show up to practices. He had a stand-in do the whole act with the dancers and guests instead. If there wasn't a football game on TV, he would sometimes watch the practice on a screen in his locker room. But when the cameras started rolling, Dean was calm, smooth, and in charge. From 1965 to 1974, 40 million people watched that show, called The Dean Martin Show. People liked how he seemed so natural. Someone once told Dean, "This show is a hit because that's me on the screen. There's no fake in it. No, that's really me." He got so cool that even Elvis looked up to him. Elvis didn't get along with artists like Sinatra, but he admired Dean. In the early 1950s, Dean was one of Elvis's favorite singers. Dean was even at an Elvis show where Elvis sang Dean's hit song, "Everybody Loves Somebody." Dean didn't read much, but he loved comic books. Black Beauty was the only full book he had ever read. He said, "You don't have to be smart if you're lucky." That line was great for how laid back he seemed. He read cartoons well into his adult years. The one time he really felt like a star was when he met Bob Kane, the man who made Batman. Dean was even in his own comic book show with Jerry Lewis. It was called The Adventures of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, and had 40 issues from 1952 to 1957. A star that is quiet and has a sad heart. In 1987, bad things happened. Paul Dean, Dean's son, died in a plane crash. Dean was very sad about it. Among other things, he pulled away from his friendship with Sinatra. He left them on their tour too. That was the start of the trip. Later, Tom Dreesen said that this was the point at which they started to move apart. Dean had lost a part of himself, but Dean and the other man made up with time. They took care of that split quickly. Frank Sinatra gave a moving farewell to Dean after he died. "Dean has been like the air I breathe," he said, "always nearby, and there. He chose to be my brother, not because he was related to me by blood. He stayed humble. Even though he had a lot of success with his TV shows and songs, he never tried to get attention." He started the Dean Martin Show in 1965. It was a variety show where he sang, laughed, and always looked calm. People loved the show because Dean was so laid back. He made it look like it was easy. The Dean Martin Celebrity Roast was his show from 1974 to 1984. It was a fun way to make fun of celebrities, comedians, and even politicians. It became a favorite again. Dean kept busy by playing shows, recording songs, and going to nightclubs. He was in 85 movies and TV shows by the end of his career. More than 12 million songs in the US alone, and more than 50 million records around the world. His singing became well known in the United States. People still play songs like That's Amore, Sway, Volar, So Everybody Loves Somebody, and Ain't That a Kick in the Head. Dean Martin made people laugh, made songs, and made memories. He was strong, but most people never knew how strong he really was. It also had something to do with his personal life. Dean's first love, and the start of a big family. In 1941, Dean Martin got married for the first time. Lizzie Ann Betty McDonald was his wife. She was his first love, and when he was just starting out in his job, she helped him build a family. They lived together in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. After they got married, after a short time, they had children. Craig was their first child, and he was born in 1941. Then came Gail, in 1945, Claudia, in 1944, and Diana, in 1948. There were now 4 kids, 1 boy and 3 girls. The marriage didn't last though. 8 years of being together made them decide to split up in 1949. All 4 of the kids were given to Dean, and Betty moved to the San Francisco area. After the split, she stayed out of the public eye, and died in 1989. There was a short time when Betty was with Dean, but she was there when he was still making a name for himself. He was known for having a big family, and she helped raise the first half of it. Even after they broke up, Dean's children stayed close to her. Dean's life changed again soon after Betty left though, for someone who would be more than just his second wife. Dean's wife of 24 years. There was only a week between Dean's second marriage and his split from Betty. Jean Beager, a model and past Orange Bowl queen, was his second wife. On September 1st, 1949, they got married at the home of a popular club owner in Hollywood. Dean had Jerry Lewis as his best man. Jean met Dean at a club in Miami on New Year's Eve of the previous year. At the time, she had no idea who Dean or Jerry was. But Jean told Nick Toscas, the writer, that "We looked at each other and I knew, we fell deeply in love." Born in 1951, Dean Paul Jr., 1953, and 1953, and 1956 respectively, were their 3 children. Dean already had 4 kids from his first marriage, so Jean took on the role of mother to a large family. In all they raised 7 kids. Dean made fun of his big family, and his jokes a lot. "I have 7 kids" was one of his most well-known jokes. "Hello, goodbye, and I'm pregnant" are the 3 things you hear most often at my house. On the outside, Dean and Jean's life looked great. They were one of the most popular couples in Hollywood. During their marriage, rose to fame as a singer, actress, and Las Vegas main attraction. He also joined Frank Sinatra in the famous Rat Pack. But even though everything went well, it didn't last forever. Jean said in a statement on December 10, 1969, that they were splitting up. After being married for 24 years, they got a divorce in 1972. Dean was the one who put things in. "I know it's the gentlemanly thing to let the wife file," he said again when asked about it. "But then everyone knows I'm no gentleman." Dean and Jean stayed in touch after they got separated, especially after a tragedy in their family years later. That marriage lasted the least time, and was the last one. Dean wasn't single for very long. He split up with Jean in 1973, and that same year he got married again. This time it was to Catherine Hahn, who works as a receptionist at a salon in Beverly Hills. A family friend put them in touch with each other, and they quickly chose to get married. It was a big wedding with lots of famous people, like Frank Sinatra. The wedding was big, but the marriage wasn't meant to last.
Dean and Catherine were only together for 3 years before they split up in 1976. Even though they didn't have any kids together, took Catherine's daughter Sasha in and raised her as his own. Dean was no longer interested in getting married after this. In the last 19 years of his life, he never got married again. This was his last marriage. But what's interesting is that Dean got back in touch with Jean after his breakup with Catherine. They didn't get married again, but they did spend time together, especially after their son's death, which was very sad. The breakup that got Dean and Jean back together. Dean's son Dean Paul Martin Jr. died in a military jet crash in 1987. He was only 35 years old. Dean was very sad. He changed a lot after the loss. This terrible event brought Dean and Jean back together. Even after they got divorced, they stayed friends, but now their bond got stronger. As he dealt with the grief of losing a child, Jean was there for him. He had a tough time getting better, and many people say he was never the same again. Dean and Jean stayed close until Dean's death in 1995, from effects from lung cancer. Around the world, a hero died on Christmas Day. Jean also lost the man she used to call the love of her life. Jean never got married again. In Beverly Hills, she had a quiet life. She died in 2016 at the age of 89, after a long fight with cancer. That same year in August 2016, their artist son Richie Martin had died. Dean and Jean separated after being married, but their love for each other stayed strong until the end. While Dean Martin was thought to be a family man, things were not always so great behind the scenes. There are whispers and one shocking truth. In her autobiography, Sandra Lansky, daughter of the famous mobster Meyer Lansky, wrote about events that shocked many people many years later. Dean Martin was married to Jean at the time. Sandra said she had an affair with him, not just any time, but while Jean was pregnant with their daughter Gina. Sandra wrote in her book, "I had never seen anything like Dean Martin's masculinity. We kissed 6 times in one night, I counted." She added that Dean wanted to savor every moment, and that they would drink Coke between rounds. They had what she called an unspoken pact to never talk about their personal lives during the affair. Sandra said she didn't even know Dean's wife was pregnant at the time. The public never saw this side of Dean. Most fans believed his image, the cool, charming star who was a good husband and father. As Lee Hale, musical director of the Dean Martin Show, once said, Dean's viewers knew he was a good husband and father, and the booze and broads jokes were just part of the act. But Sandra's story gave people a glimpse into a different Dean, a man who, despite all his charm and humor, had his own secrets and made mistakes along the way. He was never the same again. Dean Martin may have looked calm on the outside, but those close to him saw something change after the death of his son. According to author William Keck, Dean was suffering from more than just grief. He was carrying a broken heart. In his memoir, When You Step Upon a Star, Cringe-Worthy Confessions of a Tabloid Bad Boy, Keck shared how Dean's final years were full of sadness. He explained that even though Dean still smiled and joked with those around him, the spark in him had faded. It wasn't just the loss, it was the kind of pain that never really goes away. Keck told Fox News that Dean would often tell him, "I'll be back on that stage one day, you'll see me." But deep down it was clear he was done. He had no plans to perform again. His heart just wasn't in it anymore. People around him noticed this too. Close friend and impressionist Rich Little said it best. Once he lost his son, that was the end of him. That was a big part of him that died, and never recovered. Those words painted the picture clearly. Dean had lost more than a son. He had lost himself. According to Jerry Lewis, that's when Dean really started drinking. Jerry said simply, Dean let himself go. The performance stopped being an act. The pain took over. He didn't talk much about it. He didn't seek attention, but those who had known him for years saw the difference. Dean Martin, the man who once lit up every room, now just wanted quiet. He pulled away from the spotlight and slowly faded out of public life. His final goodbye. In 1993, Dean's health started to decline. He had been a heavy smoker all his life, and that finally caught up with him. He was diagnosed with lung cancer at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Doctors told him surgery could help him live longer, but Dean refused treatment. By early 1995, he had retired from public life. He stayed at home in Beverly Hills, away from cameras, fans, and the stage he once loved. That same year on Christmas Day, Dean Martin died of acute respiratory failure caused by emphysema. He was 78 years old. His death was felt deeply across the world. In Las Vegas, a city he helped make famous, the lights on the strip were dimmed in his honor. It was one final salute to a man who had given so much joy, music, and laughter. Dean was buried at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. His crypt carries a simple yet powerful message. One line from his most famous song, "Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime." William Keck, who had spoken to Dean in his final years, attended the private VIP funeral. Many celebrities came to say goodbye, but the moment that stayed with everyone came in the middle of the service. The room went dark. Everything was still. And then Rosemary Clooney, a close friend and aunt of actor George Clooney, began to sing "Everybody Loves Somebody." Keck described the moment as surreal. In a room full of stars, it was a simple song from a friend that captured everything. A quiet personal goodbye to a man the world knew as a legend, but who, in the end, was just a father, a friend, and a man who missed his son. Do you think Dean Martin truly found peace in his final years, or was he always carrying that heartbreak? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.